I think we should go ahead and start, and if anybody's late, they're late. I'm Ariel, and I started Loop Art Critique, and Cha and Carolina are also here. We're all involved with Loop Art Critique, and Renata was graciously our guest juror for cohort 10, and she attended a lot of the critiques, almost every single one, with the group, and is a fantastic artist. She's part of the Tech Expressionism group, which I knew about prior and was really excited to meet more of them. And she's going to guide us through some of her work. And I think I'll let you introduce yourself more. So take it away, Renata.
Thank you, Ariel. And thank you very much to Ariel, Carolina, and for inviting me and welcoming me into the Loop Critique art space. And I don't want to go into my biography very much. I'll give you a 3-sentence potted bio. So I was born in London, England, to a Hungarian mother and a Polish father. I emigrated with them to Canada as a very small child. And I did my studies in fine art at the University of Toronto, studio and art history, and I also studied at the Ontario College of Art and Design University. The name of my brand is Electronic Canvas. I began it in 2010. I started on an iPod Touch. I graduated to the first iPad, and I haven't looked back. I absolutely love painting with light, which is part of the electronic canvas moniker. So, when you think of a canvas, you think of a brush and hand-drawn work. And I try all the time to incorporate some elements of hand in my works, even though I'm more and more mechanizing, using AI and using some software that doesn't require a painter's touch. But I think you'll see, if you look hard in my works, you can almost always find at least a trace of some brush strokes. And I make my own custom brushes, which is really, I find it very liberating to be able to do that. Ariel mentioned the Texpressionism movement. It's either a movement, a community, or a way of approaching art making. It's been going since just before the pandemic, and I joined in 2021, and it's been a life-changing experience. You're a Texpressionist when you say you are. So we meet once a month. We used to meet bi-monthly, and we record our meetings. They're salons in the spirit of other art salons from the past. And we have a quote here from Christiane Paul, where she says she likes Texpressionism as a term because it transcends boundaries. And she's all for openness, and she thinks it fulfills an important function if artists align themselves with the term. And we found a platform where we can discuss things. And it's really a very detailed website. There are many, many pages to go through. We have an advisor. You can see a photograph of her on the screen there beside Christiane Paul. Her name is Helen Harrison, and she's an art historian. She's the former head of the Pollock Krasner House I know it's in New York State. She just recently retired from the directorship, so it's really great to have somebody who's so well versed in the abstract expressionist movement. She's an expert on Pollock. And we take some of our position, as if you will, or a place in art history as another variant on expressionism. So we have German expressionism with Der Blaureiter and that group, and then we have the abstract expressionists mostly centered in New York, neo-expressionism, and now Texpressionism. Here's a work of mine on the right, and its title is the Imperial Air. It's sort of a father and son. That's how I view it. The two shapes are representing a familial bond. And so when I thought of the term imperial, I was thinking of Japanese culture. And oddly enough, the curator of the show, Colin Goldberg, is of Japanese ancestry. This was printed on aluminum substrate, and I think it's probably about 4 feet by 3 feet. And to the left, you can see work by Devonte, and below him, there's work by another artist whose name, I'm sorry, here we are, Brandon Gallis. So this particular work, because it's digital, took a variety of forms. And the Southampton Arts Centre, which is where the show was held, chose it to be the lead image for publicity. And I'm just going to show you just how it's so interesting to me that digital works can be reproduced in so many ways and in so many formats, provided you have a good file to start with. So they made a postcard that was sent out to something like 3,500 homes in the Long Island area. And then there was a local paper did a story. And I think that the paper did a great job integrating the art with the text. Here's a banner that was on the outside of the museum, and the banners were over 6 feet, 2 inches high, because that's how tall the artist Skojo is standing in front of the banner. So they were around 10, 11 feet high. And I think that they worked fairly well with the text. Here's Aya Goldberg, Colin Goldberg's daughter, holding the postcard, so you can see the scale of it. And from there, I'm going to jump to NFTs. One of the first projects I did was a series about a woman named Marlena Janiszewska, and she's seen on the left in the little image there with Felix Shandor, her familiar, and then she's seen in the middle of the screen as a kind of Joan of Arc figure. And I made moving image works using her as the main character, and I had stories written for each of the I guess each of the times I minted something, there was a narrative that went along. She lives in a castle or a palace or a chateau called Marlinspike, and she's kind of what I would call a feminist icon. The armor is very symbolic here of, how tough women have to be on the outside to find a place to make their work known or to have any kind of a significant career. But there's a kind of whimsical quality to her. She wears a lot of different kinds of hats, and she has a kind of butterfly on her shoulder, and they're all on foundation. I know one of them is in the Texpressionism collection on foundation, because I traded an NFT with Colin Goldberg. In 2023, I suddenly got a DM on Twitter telling me that I was part of an NFT calendar of 2024, and would I like to give permission to take part. So I gave them a quote, and the calendar was released. Tommy Mintz, one of the Texpressionists, bought it and saw it, and he asked me if he could use the image as the lead image for the next museum, the first and next museum show of Texpressionism, which is called Hello Brooklyn. And I'm giving you the original work here because, as you can see, the image gets pretty degraded when it gets printed and then it gets photographed. You can see by looking at the R on the bottom how kind of blurry the R looks, and here it looks in the original. So I'm in very good hands with this one because Colin Goldberg designed the poster, the postcard, and the catalog cover. And I helped him, I chose the color for the background and the font. It's Helvetica Noi. I'm a very heavy user of Helvetica Noi and Helvetica itself. I can't continue my talk without giving a shout out or a mention to Mauna. Mauna found my work on Object, and this was the one, this one is called Soldavia. It's the name of an imaginary country in the series of books about Tintin. And I made an animated work, a moving image work to go with this, and they chose it for their collection, and I was really pleased and honored to be discovered via my work and not via some other format like social media, for example. I think Mauna does really important work for artists, especially because part of their mandate is to help or allow artists to make a reasonable living from their work. And the world of NFTs is hard to navigate sometimes because it's so complex, but they are partnering with Texpressionism to do an online exhibition coupled with an NFT drop, and the submissions are still open. I believe they're open until July, probably the first week of July, and the details are on both the Texpressionism website and the Mauna website. Mauna stands, I don't know, I didn't mention, but Mauna stands for Museum of Wild and Newfangled Art. And they do a really fantastic job of curating and presenting the work. And I've been lucky enough to be included in several of their shows or exhibitions. And I hope you look them up. I curated a show with the Texpressionists in the fall of last year. And the reason people always ask me, why the mushrooms? The reason for the mushrooms was that as curators, we were really tired of the white box, wooden floor aspect of online art presentation. So we decided we would use a 3D platform. We chose Mozilla Hubs. Tommy Mintz was the chief architect of the site, and I contributed the idea that we do something more organic and less like an art gallery. So could we have a moss floor? Could we have mushrooms growing out of the floor? And then he suggested a piazza, and we made a town square, and we had doors around the town square. And each artist who participated had their own studio, which you access through their door. And on the doors were images of each artist's work. And the Wrong Digital Biennale asked us to include Siberiana in their Biennale. So they chose my image, this one here, to be the cover image on their website. So I was pretty honored by that. And I designed the logos for the show, and I chose Gill Sans, which is quite an old font. It's from the 1930s, because I thought it had a kind of there's just kind of a nostalgia to the font, and then the logo here is so futuristic, and it is a combination of mushrooms and a spaceship. I also did a lot of posters and flyers for the show. And the reason I picked this one to show you is that when I talked about painting with light, in digital art, you can pump up your colors, you can super saturate them, you can make them scream. And it's difficult sometimes to tone them down. But here, because there's a lot of black around them, and because the subject matter is slightly hallucinatory, you're going to this place where you might see mushrooms growing, and it's fanciful. There's a kind of fantasy element to it. So in this case, I think these hot pinks and oranges are permissible. But generally, I try to use color in a more traditional, if you will, or less overt way, perhaps. I don't really want my work to scream at you. This is Lee Day's studio in the Siberiana world, and he does really great works using an iPhone taped to a high-speed moving train. He did these in Japan. So the images that are in black frames are the stills from those high-speed train pans, and they go on for the whole day. And then the walls of his room are miniaturized works, just like the ones in the frames, but the entire wall is made up of thousands and thousands of these images. And to me, this is another thing of the beauty of digital, is that you can scale things in really radical ways. Also, he made his room kind of long and narrow, so you felt like you were walking into a shipping container, and it's all dark inside except for those three walls. This one is by Malcolm Fernandez. He's an artist based out of India, and this was kind of like walking into the basement of a museum. He had a cloud in the middle of the room, which he had made in Blender. He had a tree growing out of the floor, and he had these videos playing on all the walls. And it was a bit like a museum show, because the text was beside the big video walls. And to my mind, this was one of the most successful works in the whole show. Here I'm giving you a glimpse of the piazza, or the town square. If you look to the middle of this slide and out into the rear of it, behind the artwork, you'll see part of the architecture of the town square. You'll see the blue sky that we included, and the terracotta walls, if you will. And some artists just open their studio up to the square, to the piazza. This is the work of an artist named Miu. It's spelled M-I-U, and then it has 4 underscores. She's from Germany. Her real name is Andrea, and she's making a very elaborate world here, but she's displaying them in more of a traditional gallery way. You can see there's even a bench for people to sit on, theoretically or metaphorically. I made a room, and Ariel has put a portal to it in our space. Ariel's going to lead the way. If you just like to go over towards the entry, and we'll meet inside.
Yes, I'm over here. I'm standing right in front of it, waving my little. Oh, I clapped. Now I'm going to wave. And so once you click the button into this portal, it's going to take you straight in there. So I'm just making sure everybody's going to follow me. So see you over there. Oh, wow. It's going to be... All right. Let's see, who is in here? I was going to ask either Cha or Carolina. Can you guys maybe go back and grab anyone who is wandering around, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks. All right, cool. I love this GIF up here, or this little video. Oh. I also like the moon. It's so simple, but very effective.
What is the way back button?
We are actually just going to use the back button. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, make it very simple, not interfere with the artwork. So nice to hear your voice, Galena. Okay. Pop back.
Hi, Ariel.
Hi.
I started doing moving image works in 2020 and didn't really get rolling until 21. So one of the things that I am aware of with doing this type of work online is that there's a parallel with the hip hop movement in music. What we're doing now in digital art is similar to what the artists in the 90s were doing. Was a grassroots type movement. The technology was there. They had cassettes that were easy to send to people. You could spread your work without much effort, and it was cheap to make your work. And that is exactly how I feel about these moving image works, where it's not hard for me to make everything in my home studio and to package it and to send it out. And ideally, I'd like people to see my moving image works on a giant screen in there that's dark with Dolby sound. I don't make them in surround sound yet, but I do make them in stereo, and the sound is very much an intrinsic part of the work. And I guess I'm going to show you a couple or three. The first one is called Walking the Bulldog in Anatolia, because if you listen carefully, you can actually hear the words, I'm walking, walking, walking the bulldog. And this is a part of a series of 6 moving image works that I minted to the first Dibs platform. And I wanted to write a text to go with each one. So I'm going to put the text on the screen, and I'm going to let you read it yourselves before we watch the actual work.
Walking the bull, out for the got they think, who got they think, who got they think, who got they think, who.
The next one is called Le Nid de Duc, and I found the title of the work comes after a painting that was done by David Hockney, and he used to go to a place called Le Nid de Duc in the south of France. And in this painting, his ex-partner Peter is looking down into the swimming pool. I know Hockney can be a bit of a divisive figure in the art, looking at art history and contemporary art, but he is a master, and he's tried every single medium there is, and he's pushed the boundaries. And I've followed his work since I was an art student. So as an aside about NFTs, I think as artists, people realize that you can actually program in sorry, I'm going blank. In terms of secondary sales, you can program that into them. Whereas with regular art, with a canvas like this, when Hockney made it in 75, it sold for 110,000 US. And in 2018, it sold for 90.3 million. And of course, the artist didn't profit from any of that. So to go further, I'm going to read you the text that goes with this. The god Dionysus famously asked King Midas, "What is your fondest wish, O mighty one?" "Why, of course, I want everything I ever touch to turn to gold," he thundered. Now dozing drunkenly in his vaulted chamber of stained glass, manic shafts of hot pink light agitate his senses. He craves the cool, silky shade of his garden, its swirling, fragrant tendrils, moist, fat roses, and feathered trees. Sensing peril, the garden awakens. The king cannot open his door. He shatters his windows with gold bricks. He expands, explodes, and metamorphosizes into a colossal, hoarding disk of 22-carat madness. He sees, as his eyes turn to golden dust, the sweet, beckoning green of the grass, the subtle colors of the flowers. I'm going to jump into the present now. For about a year, I've been working on a show with one other artist. Her name is Karen Lafleur. She's also in the Texpressionism community, and her works are the ones to the left and the right, and mine is in the center. The exhibition is going to take place from November till February of next year, and the Cape Cod Museum of Art requested that we do a maritime theme. It's not easy for me as an artist to be told, okay, this is your subject matter, but at least doing something on the ocean is a vast topic. So we have we have 3 trailers. This is the short trailer. So I'll just let you take a look at it. Just to let you know more a little bit about this, we've made a 44-page digital catalog for the show that actually has some movement inside of it. And as I said, the 3 trailers, and Karen is looking at the ocean through the lens of science because she's working with a scientist from Woods Hole, which is an oceanographic institute, and they have a program where they pair scientists up with artists for a year, and they actually work together. So it's been really fascinating seeing what she's producing. And I had to go another way, so I went through the lens of myth, and I did some reading and just sort of thinking about things from a Jungian perspective, creating tales about the sea. And I'm using AI a fair bit in these for the image, some of the imagery. I'm always fascinated by the work on The Wrong TV. It's a 24-hour channel that broadcasts from a cable station in Portugal. And the curator, one of the founders of The Wrong, invited me to show this work on their channel. There was some data moshing in that one at the end there. That's a data moshing is hard to control, but something I'm working with. I'm taking you into more of the faces now. The series I did for the Wrong this year was called Visage Tendre, which means tender faces. And again, I'm using different brushes here, and I'm sort of layering shape upon shape, brushwork upon brush. The faces are similar to these faces are from Cosmo magazine in the late 80s, early 90s. There was a photographer named Francesco Scavullo, and he made all the women look the same. They all had this kind of zombie look in their eyes, and that's what these faces that the AI and I make together remind me of. I also include this work because it has some new custom brushes in it, and I'm finding I'm getting better with making the brushes have a lot of dimensionality, have a lot of weight, have a 3D quality to them. It's something you cannot achieve easily, but it seems to be coming along nicely. Again, my faces of these AI creatures are kind of like zombies as well. They don't really look quite real. They're all the same woman, in effect, and that's what I found with the Cosmo covers too. They basically blend into being all the same woman from Mars. This I put in here to show you what happens when you train an AI on your drawings. This is actually the first time the AI took one of my drawings and played with it and experimented with it. And the other thing I wanted to point out was at this point in time, this is I don't know, this is maybe a month ago. Finally, we get rid of the teal and orange on Midjourney. That's the AI that I use, and it was always a telltale giveaway that you were using it because it was skewed towards orange and teal. And now I can get these pinks, and again, I draw your attention to the brushwork in the background. That's mostly AI, partly me. I mean, I go in and I work over top of them, but I'm kind of impressed that the AI can draw a little bit now. It's just it just kind of there's a good balance here between my work and the work of the AI. Again, a zombie look. Here the blues are really good in this particular work, and you couldn't have done this a few months ago even in Midjourney. And that's just to show you sometimes I will glitch and filter a work. So you can see what happens. In this case, I tried something here where I doubled the work. So this is a double exposure of the same painting, and it gave the faces a different kind of quality, a different depth, and it gave the colors a different richness. Another thing that I'm very interested in is metallics and how to render metallics in a digital way. And in this work, on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see these kind of ridged lines that are almost, they really, to me, they really come across as a gold color. And I get my interest in gold from Gustav Klimt and also his successor much later in history, Friedrich Hundertwasser. They both use gold a lot, and Klimt was part of the Viennese secession movement and 1/8 Austrian, and I have a real fascination with his work and the work of the artists around him at the same time. This is to show you how AI can come up with extremely bizarre images just by blending. So I'm also drawing your attention to the brushwork in the background, because it almost looks like it could have been done by an Edvard Munch or a Vincent van Gogh. The kind of roughness to it is interesting, how it clashes with the more fineness of the work in the foreground. And this is also just to show you how completely bizarre it can be. I mean, I'm telling it styles. I'm saying, give me a Rococo or give me a Northern Renaissance. And I often feed a painter's name, like an artist from history, into what I'm doing. I'll give it several images, and then I will say, please do this in the style of Piero della Francesca. And so this is kind of Botticelli meets Fragonard. I'm not going to take you to Spiky Bay because we'd have to go in and out, but there is an artist whom Ariel introduced me to, and he has a really great website through which you can access a painting program that's free software for 3D rooms, and I will put his name in the chat for you. Ariel told me about it, and the name of the program is the Everything Canvas. So I spent some time making these 3D environments and then going in and photographing them. This is, again, work of my own that I fed into the AI, and it really came out in this sort of, the colors are mine, but I would say the shapes are because of the AI. And also, sometimes I'll collage in something. So I put in this little Saturn figure at the bottom. And there's another one from that series. Joey Zaza from Mauna taught me about GLB files. And so these are actually based on GLBs, but then I put them through Midjourney, and this is what came out. And I clean them up. I usually do post-production on most of my works. And so we have a few minutes left for questions. And if there are no questions, I just wanted to give a shout out again to Ariel, Carolina, and I also wanted to mention that they have a Sunday salon, Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's on the Loop website, and it's an opportunity to talk shop. It's really a great experience. I've been very lucky to meet all three of you, and again, it was great pleasure to participate in your program.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give a round
you, Renata.
of applause.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Yes, it's wonderful. That is awesome. So, yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. The Spiky Bay is also the one that she was speaking of, is this portal over here. And I also wanted to point out that there is an avatar that it's also made from that program. If you look to the left of the screen, it's a gigantic avatar that's probably gotten in your way a few times. This guy is also made from that, so it's a pretty cool program. But yeah, so does anybody have any questions? Please ask away.
I wanted to first thank so much, Renata, for your talk, and being a Russian here and looking at the mushrooms and the name Siberiana. I don't know if you were aware that mushrooms in Siberia are a very important part of of culture.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's just fascinating to bring that reference and play with it in so multidimensional way. So I really appreciate it. I don't know if you're aware, there is a magazine coming out of UK, and it's also online. It's called Antenna, Journal of Nature and Visual Culture. And they had a whole issue on mushrooms called Mycologist. And I'm published in it because I talked about Russia and mushrooms in the issue. So yeah, it's all online. If you go to antenna.org, I'll put a link in the chat. But it's so fascinating, the work that you're doing, especially with oceans and nature. So if you're familiar, there are a lot of issues that are coming out. There was an issue recently, queering nature. So there is always things related to nature and visual culture and art. So you might be able to connect to that community, and all issues are online and you can download them.
That's really great. I look forward to looking at it. And Ariel, thank you for mentioning David O'Reilly, the Irish artist who makes really crazy work. I love his moving image works. They're very original. Originality, it's something that's not always easy to find in the cluttered landscape that we move in. So his everything canvas is very rich. There's a lot there to work with.
Yeah,
and
we need a 100% sign for that, because it is absolutely fantastic work. And actually, I'll dig out the link to that and post it in the chat, because yeah, a big part of Loop is posting things in the Discord and the chat and sharing everyone's knowledge base. Does anyone else have a question?
Renata, could you talk about how you create music?
Sure. I'm a kid who took piano lessons for 10 years. My sister's she's a pianist. That's how she makes her living. And I started fooling around with GarageBand and realized that I could make my own soundtracks, and that was it. I was hooked. And I do some post-production using other software, but essentially I'm using loops, and it's kind of like the hip hop thing where you can just sample. And I really enjoy it. It used to be that I made the music after, but now I make the music first and put the images to go with it. Nice. I call myself an amateur when it comes to the music, but it's so nice to have that control and not to have to rely on an outsider.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah. I only got busted once by the platform Vimeo, where I keep I put all my moving image works so people can watch them there in 4K. And there were 2 chords, literally 2 chords, so 8 notes that were part of a sample from GarageBand, and some other band had gotten them and used them on YouTube. And Vimeo shut my work down and said you could only have it listed privately because of those 2 notes.
Wow.
2 chords. Crazy, huh? But see, the other people were there first, and I think Vimeo was afraid of any kind of lawsuits.
Uh-huh.
So it's not to say that what I'm making isn't original. It's just that sometimes there's an overlap.
Right.
So I have a quick question. I was interested in that you mentioned fonts a lot, typology and fonts. And I found that very curious. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the amazing documentary about Helvetica, and I was wondering why do you have this interest in fonts and this like very seems like very personal taste in typology?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. My father was a teacher of typography at a college here in Canada, and he studied in England, and his teachers were familiar with the Bauhaus. And so design is something I learned, as a child. And he talked a lot about the use of different kinds of fonts, and I love typography. I just think it's one of the most amazing art forms, and I'm very aware of how it works on people because there's a kind of psychological element to it, and the clarity element. And yes, the documentary Helvetica, one of my favorite docs of all time. It's just design is everywhere, and we need good design. We need things to be clear. We need things to be legible, and it's probably the most legible typeface ever. So I'm a big fan of, and that, I hope that answers your question, Ariel.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've got to rewatch that documentary because it's just got some of the most amazing emotional responses to typography. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have another question. Your images are very innocent and they're very seductive at the same time, and they're very Botticelli-esque. So, and you mentioned Fra Angelico and Piero della Francesco. How is the Renaissance, like what role does it play in your sort of canon, like being digital and going back to the Renaissance? I think this is so seductive and so productive at the same time.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. You speak very nicely about my work. I do have a feel for actually the Northern European Renaissance is something I'm very fascinated by. Jan van Eyck and Lucas Cranach. They had a kind of realism that was very personal. And the Italian Renaissance had a classicism that they drew from the Greeks and the Romans. And there's something timeless about the look of the characters in the Italian Renaissance work. And I think that, people don't look back very much, but when you go to the Louvre and you see the winged Nike of Samothrace, and just see how incredibly moving the sculptures of the Greeks and the Romans were, how they could touch your emotions even though they were made of stone. And so with digital, there's a kind of impersonality, I think, sometimes because we are using code and we are using, people. One gallerist here in Canada said, "Oh, digital artists, they just push a button and it comes out." And I think I sort of work really hard to make my images things that you want to contemplate. They're not flash in the pan. There's something that I would like people to sit with them just in the same way that you would sit with a Botticelli or you would sit with a Jan van Eyck.
Thank you so much. This is so fascinating. Are you familiar with the work of Claudia Hart? She's so she works a lot with Fragonard and that like other classicism. She was my teacher. So that's
I was just talking about her a few minutes before I started. I was just discussing her work with somebody, and I admire her so much. She studied architecture, And yeah, she likes to reference the art of the past as well. I encourage you, if you're fooling around with an AI engine, just type in style of and list your favorite artist from history and see how that affects the work.
Yeah, I'm very curious too. I'm subscribed to Midjourney and I'm never satisfied with the results because I'm obsessed with my own lines. But I think listening to you, and it's all about how you train it, I guess. I didn't find the good training technique yet to be satisfied, but it's fascinating. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's really nice to meet you.
Yeah, we're actually working on a big loop sort of reunion thing. You guys are actually the first to hear about it. So coming up, in this summer, we're going to try to put together sort of a big reunion for everybody involved to come and meet each other and see old friends so that you can, because I just did the math and there's been 59 people, artists and jurors alike combined, that have come through Loop. So I thought it would be a good way we should probably do some sort of mixer so that more connections can be made between the different participants. So that was some alpha.
Amazing.
Because we've had some amazing people. Definitely. All right. I had one more. I also wanted to know when you were looking at different like exhibition spaces, and I guess this is kind of a selfish question, but I'll ask it just really quickly. We probably should wrap up, but we were looking through different sort of like people's exhibition spaces at the very beginning of the lecture, and you were saying which ones you thought. What I mean is like virtual reality galleries or whatever you want to call it, VR spaces. What do you think makes like a really interesting one, and what do you think, and you can, you won't hurt my feelings if you're like, green grounds and blue skies are terrible. What do you think are ones that are, I don't know, not as interesting when it comes to exhibiting in VR or metaverses?
Well, I think that we're at a threshold right now where we're just starting to understand how these spaces can be functional and what their strengths are. So anything that works. I mean, I realize that you've got a lot of experience with creating different galleries. You have done those domes and done a kind of a sky. Usually I like to have a neutral space to work in. That's why my Siberiana room is all black.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's because the colors are so hot. I wanted them to really glow in the dark. But yeah, it depends. I think it really depends on the style of work that's being displayed and the kind of intention. And one of the things I usually ask myself when I put anything out for people is, the first question is, does it look good? And the second question is it original? So I hope that helps you.
Oh, for sure. All right. Last call. Last call for any questions or comments.
Can I just give a shout out to the Loop Art Critique again? And can I also mention that Texpressionism has an Instagram account, and we're almost 74,000 uses of the hashtag Texpressionism. So the address on Instagram is at Texpressionism, and I curate it. So I choose whatever goes up there.